Birth Order Psychology and Prince Harry. This video is an appeal for help because I am way out of my comfort zone here. Yes, I am back in the land of psychology, and not being a psychologist, I am up a creek without a paddle. I'm hoping you'll be able to fill up my knowledge gaps and educate me on what is actually a very fascinating subject. I am, of course, talking about birth order psychology. It's a subject I tried to study many years ago, but in the end, I had to abandon my self-study because I had more questions than answers the more I delved into it. But even though I left the subject behind, it wouldn't leave me alone. I'm always being confronted with it wherever I look these days. You all know what I mean, right? There is no bigger source of birth order psychology today than royal families all over the world. We are hearing every day about second son syndrome, certainly with respect to the British royal family, in multiple generations. Not only with respect to Princes William and Harry, but also to King Charles and Prince Andrew. And going further back in history, Prince Albert, who later became, of course, King George VI, the father of our late Queen, and his brother Prince David, who temporarily became King Edward VII and ended up the Duke of Windsor until his death. We see the Danish royal brothers, King Frederick and Prince Joachim, in their interaction as siblings and marvel at how the dynamics resemble both the King Charles, Prince Andrew, and also the Prince William, Prince Harry dynamics in many ways. We are hearing more and more about the delightful Princess Charlotte being the typical middle child, or more commonly, the perfect big sister to Prince Louis, as she takes him under her wing and shows him how to behave when they are out in public. A more adorable brother and sister relationship is hard to find. We hear about the supportive role Princess Anne plays in her older brother King Charles's life. And we wonder if Princess Charlotte will do the same one day for Prince George. We also wonder if Princess Anne was exactly with Prince Andrew when they were children as Charlotte is with Louis today. Not to talk of another royal brother and sister dynamic in Europe, the Norwegian Crown Prince Haakon and his sister Princess Märtha Louise, although in their case it's not so much the interaction between the siblings as the lifestyle and spiritual beliefs of the sister that is making all the headlines for decades now. If we look to Spain and Belgium, the new emerging generation of young royals are starting to provide us with fodder on the subject of birth order psychology. Sweden provides us with another Charlotte-Louis dynamic in which the Crown Princess Victoria is regularly lauded for her big sister caring attitude towards her younger siblings. And what about the role birth order plays when it comes to marriage? I have heard it said more than once that Prince William and Princess Catherine's marriage works so well because they are both firstborns. They have the same mindset. Speaking of firstborns, apparently there's something special about firstborns. Their qualities, which I shall get into later, enable them to be natural leaders. Is this why only firstborns inherit royal titles? Why is this better than waiting for the family to be completed and then deciding on the lastborn as the heir? A la young David in the Bible, specifically chosen and anointed by Prophet Samuel with God's guidance as the successor to King Saul. Or is this just my jealousy as a lastborn rearing its ugly head? And what about Joseph and Benjamin, last but one and last born respectively of Jacob, also in the Bible? These two youngest sons were described as favored by their father, provoking intense jealousy from the other brothers. But could it be that they were favored only because of who their mother was? Their mother Rachel was the one that Jacob worked extra years for. Remember that story? Forced to serve Rachel's father Laban for 7 years to win her, Jacob was tricked at the end into marrying her sister Leah. He was then allowed to marry Rachel as well in return for 7 more years of labor. So maybe no wonder he loved her sons more. He must have really wanted Rachel to work another 7 years for her. But this brings up the first of my conundrums with respect to birth order psychology. What role does step-siblings play in all of this? Let's take Joseph as an example here. With respect to his father, he was an 11th born. But with respect to his mother, he was a firstborn. So how do we assess his birth order psychology? As a firstborn or as an 11th born? This dynamic, of course, also pertains to Meghan Markle. With respect to her father, she is a lastborn, and with respect to her mother, she is a firstborn. So, what is she? Another problem I have is, what about multiples? Twins, triplets, quads, quints, sexts, septs, octs, nonus, and so on. Yes, the world does have nonuplets currently. They are now 3 years old and they live in Mali. Adorable. But the poor parents must get 0 sleep. How does birth order psychologically play out with children born at the same time? Is there a secret hierarchy within the group? Or do they all see themselves as equal in rank? I don't know. Are you a twin, a triplet, a quad, a quint? Please, I would love your secret knowledge into how you manage the tricky issue of birth order. I have a third problem, a rather sad one. What happens if a child dies? Does the next born take their place in birth order psychology? Does it change things if the next born child knew of the existence of the missing child? A little anecdote here. I have a friend who is the third of 3 boys in his family. In their case, it is very obvious that they are missing somebody because the children were named alphabetically. My friend's older brothers have names beginning with A and B in the right alphabetical order. But his name begins with a D, and he has always known that there was a C who died. Some people even know of siblings who were miscarried, who were not even born. Does miscarriage count in birth order psychology? If so, at what point are we supposed to start counting? At 5 months, 3 months, 6 weeks? By the way, may I apologize if this part of the video triggers bad memories for someone? I understand all too well how painful miscarriage, stillbirth, and infant loss can be. Not to talk of the loss of an adult child as well. And what happens to your psychology if you were named after a child who passed, who died? Vincent van Gogh was named after an older brother who died in childhood a year before he was born. Any thoughts on how this must have impacted his life and art? What happens when one is adopted or fostered? Is it the birth order of the natural parents that dominate, or the birth order in the family in which the child finds himself or herself. How does this play out in the household of Madonna and the family Jolie Pitt? I wonder. And what happens when you suddenly shift birth order? When your parents surprise you with an addition to the family, suddenly jettisoning you from only child planet to firstborn galaxy. Or when you were a last born for 10 years or so, and you got comfortable in that position only for your parents to suddenly fling you into middle child territory. To what time limits are you considered a last born? How do you cope with the news that dad is having another child at 74? Or your mum decided to try IVF at 56 and your birth order is about to change? Finally, what happens when your birth order is artificially skewed by having unusual circumstances within the family? What if you were a second born, but you were brought up with the expectation that you have the responsibility to one day take care of your, let's say, severely disabled older sibling? What if you were even made to understand that you were born precisely for this purpose? Do you artificially take on the characteristics of a firstborn? What if, as Prince Harry claimed in his book Spare, you were born to provide body parts for your older sibling? For example, a kidney or stem cells? Because your older sibling is considered more important than you, more valued, more cherished. How does that impact your psychology? You see why I need your help to wrap my mind around this topic? So far, here is what I know. There are 4 categories of birth order. There are the firstborns, there are the middle children, the lastborns, and then there is the only child. According to Austrian psychologist Alfred Adler, by the way, his work was heavily influenced by fellow Austrian Sigmund Freud. Firstborns get more attention from the parents because the parents, well, they've never done this before, and they are naturally enamored with their bundle of joy. They are also naive and inexperienced, so they tend to be stricter, more rule-oriented, cautious, even neurotic when dealing with the little one. This results in firstborns often becoming leaders, high-achieving, sometimes even overachieving. They're more structured, organized, they're responsible and mature. It has also been shown that firstborns tend to have more advanced cognitive development than the other kids in the family. That's a polite way to say that firstborns are more intelligent than everyone else. Could this be true? And is this the answer to my earlier question as to why they, meaning firstborns, are chosen to become the heirs to fortune, power, and the throne? Personality-wise, it is reasonable to expect that firstborns are the ones with the most to lose, because suddenly the attention that they should have got is suddenly being shared with new people coming into the frame. It is the firstborn that should be bitter, angry, and vengeful. But we tend not to see this in real life. Case in point, Prince Harry. Could it be because the characteristics of the firstborn that I describe above overrides any simmering feelings of resentment that may be lurking just underneath the surface? Do they just pull their socks up and get on with life precisely because the responsibility of taking care of everyone else falls to them? In other words, are firstborns just too busy to be bitter? Adler suggested that middle children tend to become the family's peacemakers, since they often have to mediate conflicts between older and younger siblings. They are the middleman, quite literally. They tend to be overshadowed by their elder siblings and also the younger siblings. So middle children actually tend to seek social attention from outside of the family. Middleborns are often described as independent, naturally peacemakers, people pleasers, outgoing, adaptable, attention-seeking, jealous, competitive, and insecure. While they tend to be adaptable and independent, they can also have a rebellious streak that tends to emerge when they want to stand apart from their siblings. So the term middle child syndrome is often used to describe the negative effects of being a middle child, because middle kids are sometimes overlooked. They may engage in people-pleasing behaviors as adults as a way to garner attention and favor. Some research suggests that middle children may be more sensitive to rejection, as they didn't get as much attention and were constantly in competition with their siblings. They may also struggle with the feelings of insecurity, fear of rejection, and poor self-confidence. Lastborns, often referred to as the babies of the family, are often seen as spoiled and pampered compared to their older siblings. Because parents are more experienced at this point and much busier, of course, they often take a more laissez-faire approach to parenting. Lastborn children are sometimes described as outgoing, fun-loving, charming, free-spirited, immature, manipulative, self-centered, and risk-taking. Adler's theory suggests that the youngest children tend to be outgoing, sociable, and charming, the carefree youngest child syndrome. And then we have the only children. Only children are unique, quite literally, in that they never tend to have to share their parents' attention and resources with a sibling. They may sometimes replace a missing sibling with a friend, but that's a special case. In general, only children are literally the only one within the family dynamic. Now, only children are of course firstborns, and they do share many characteristics of firstborns. They are described as mature, diligent, thoughtful, perfectionistic, high-achieving, sometimes even overachieving. They're also imaginative, self-reliant, and sensitive. As you can see, a lot of these characteristics, the first 5 or so, mature, diligent, and so forth, are very similar to the characteristics of firstborns. Because they interact with adults so much, only children often seem very mature for their age. They tend to be introverts because they have to be. They feel more comfortable being alone and enjoy spending time in solitude, pursuing their own creative ideas. So it is true that the arts and the creative subjects or aspects to life are dominated by only children. Let me know, do you believe this is true? I have no proof of this, of course, not even anecdotal, but apparently this is so. In considering how birth order affects the dynamics of a relationship, imagine what it's like when 2 firstborns bump heads in a clash of the titans, as their mutual need for control clashes, or when 2 lastborns are both so rebellious that it's their children who have to raise them, or 2 middle children who can't stop apologizing to each other for every little thing that goes wrong. These are, of course, hilarious stereotypes, but is there some truth to it? What is your experience of birth order and relationship? Can we really blame Prince Harry for his whiny last-born attitude? Or do you think I'm at it again, making excuses for the indefensible? I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and certainly I would appreciate being better informed on this matter than I currently am. Let me know. Is Prince Harry's attitude typical of a last-born? Or is he maybe a little bit unusual in this aspect? Is he over the top? Is he a crybaby who just doesn't get it that he's more privileged than most? Let me know. I am highly interested in his and other similar celebrities or famous people who, shall we say, display their birth order psychology for all of us to see. Whatever you do, stay healthy. And in this particular case, don't ask a doc, but rather tell a doc. Thank you very much. Take care.